For many decades, Machu Picchu has been an icon of mystery, history, and spirituality. Millions of visitors have walked its ancient stone paths, marveling at the Inca ruins and the clouds that seem to caress the mountains, as if guarding ancient secrets. However, not everyone who arrives manages to return. In the winter of 1989, a young European tourist named Eric Vandal vanished without a trace during what appeared to be a routine visit to the historic site. He was 27 years old, from the Netherlands, and traveling alone with backpack, a film camera, and a small notebook in which he recorded each discovery, as if writing a personal archaeology journal. What seemed to be a typical excursion to the citadel turned into one of the strangest and most intriguing cases ever recorded in the Cusco region. Eric had been staying at a hostel in Aguas Calientes, the small village at the foot of the mountain. There, he shared meals with other backpackers, laughed with the hostel owners, and expressed his enthusiasm for exploring less visited areas of the ancient Inca Trail. He was neither reckless nor inexperienced. He had studied pre-Columbian history, spoke Spanish reasonably well, and according to official records, had a valid permit to access the archaeological zone. However, on the morning of July 3rd, 1989, Eric left the hostel early with his gear and never returned. Local authorities began a limited search, initially believing he may have gotten lost, but as time passed and Eric didn't appear, fears grew that something more sinister was happening in the jungle. Most disturbing of all, his backpack was found a week later in a hard-to-reach area, more than 3 hours from the tourist trail. It was closed, showed no signs of struggle, and still contained his journal, the undeveloped film camera, and an old compass marked with unusual symbols not found on known maps. No one understood why he would have left the authorized paths or what might have drawn him to a zone that locals said should be avoided. Some claimed Eric had fallen victim to an accident, while others pointed to looters. However, the more superstitious believed he had awakened something that should have remained asleep. As time passed, his disappearance became legend. But what no one knew was that this story was far from over. 15 years later, in 2004, deep in the jungle near Vilcabamba, an expedition found something that would completely shift perceptions of the case. In May 2004, a group of independent researchers, led by Peruvian biologist Alvaro Meda and funded by a German conservation foundation, entered the jungle near Vilcabamba to study endemic species. None of the team members imagined they were about to uncover a clue related to one of the most mysterious disappearances of the 1980s. In a narrow, moss-covered ravine, while searching for traces of a species of wild orchid, one of the assistants noticed a structure partially hidden among tree roots. It wasn't a cave or natural formation, but rather a rudimentary shelter made of stacked stones and intertwined dry branches, as if someone had tried to protect themselves from the elements. Inside the structure, they found the remains of a moss-covered backpack, a severely damaged old camera, pieces of fabric, an oxidized metal box engraved with the initials EV. Intrigued, the researchers sent the items for analysis in Cusco. A local anthropologist, who vaguely remembered the case of Eric Vandal, connected the initials to the disappearance in 1989. The most disturbing find, however, was the contents of a still-readable notebook, wrapped in cloth sealed with wax. Despite damage from humidity, the pages revealed a sequence of unexpected entries. Eric had written about being followed by invisible presences and hearing chants at night coming from areas where no one should have been. In one of the final entries, he wrote, "I am not alone. Something is watching me. I don't understand what I'm discovering, but it's not Inca, it's older." These words sent chills down the spines of those who read them. What had Eric encountered in that corner of the jungle? And why did he seem increasingly convinced that what he was seeing didn't belong to this time? This discovery didn't close the case, but reopened it with even more questions. Rumors surged again. Was it a crime, a voluntary disappearance, or, as some suggested, was something buried deep in Andean history finally resurfacing? Following the discovery of Eric Vandal's notebook, international media attention returned strongly to Peru. The Ministry of Culture ordered a forensic analysis of the recovered items, and a team specializing in ancient document conservation was tasked with restoring the tourists' writings page by page. What they found defied logical explanation. Among the notes were hand-drawn maps, references to coordinates unknown to tourist routes, and symbols that had never before been linked to any recorded culture in the region. Some resembled pre-Inca glyphs, while others appeared inspired by shamanic rituals. The final pages of the notebook were especially damaged, but experts managed to recover crucial fragments. One read, "I saw faces in stone. It's not a dream. They have been here since before time had a name." Another stated, "If something happens to me, no one should follow this path. It is not a place meant for us." These words, heavy with disturbing mysticism, fueled the fascination of both researchers and conspiracy theorists alike. Theories quickly emerged, ranging from lost civilizations to interdimensional portals hidden in the mountains. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, Eric's elderly parents were initially skeptical. They had lived 15 years with the pain of uncertainty, without answers or justice. However, upon seeing the notebook and confirming that the handwriting matched their son's, they agreed to travel to Peru to join an expedition following the coordinates found. "If there's a chance to understand what happened to Eric, we will go to the end," his mother said tearfully to a Dutch journalist accompanying them. A multidisciplinary group was formed, including archaeologists, linguists, experts in pre-Hispanic cultures, a European film crew, to venture into the Vilcabamba region. What they were about to find would not only shed light on Eric's disappearance, but also raise a silent alarm within the scientific community. Some stories we dismiss as myths may simply be poorly told memories of events that actually happened, and perhaps haven't fully ended. The expedition departed at dawn on September 17, 2004, from Cusco, heading into the Vilcabamba jungle. Equipped with modern technology, including thermal cameras, drones, and provisions for several weeks, the group also included a local shaman, consulted by village elders. "This is no place for tourists," he whispered before leaving, staring at the mountains as if he could see something the others couldn't. What began as a simple trek grew increasingly silent and oppressive with each passing kilometer. The canopy seemed to close off the sky, and the feeling of being watched intensified, even among the skeptics. On the third day, they found the first signs: a small campfire reduced to ancient ashes, and a torn piece of cloth resembling the kind of backpack Eric had used in the 1980s. What disturbed the group most was an inscription carved into a nearby rock, hidden behind dense vines. It was not a recent mark, but appeared ancient, yet in a style none of the archaeologists could definitively identify. It was a symbol in the shape of an inverted spiral, surrounded by small faceless humanoid figures. The shaman, upon seeing it, murmured something in Quechua and refused to go any further, stating that the place was a doorway, and those who opened it never returned the same. Despite his warnings, the rest of the team chose to continue, using the coordinates from a notebook to venture beyond any modern map. That's when the strange phenomena began. Electronic equipment failed without explanation, compasses spun in circles, and unusual sounds, like faint voices and whispers carried by the wind, were heard at night. Some team members began to have vivid dreams of hooded figures, submerged ruins, and a hollow-eyed Eric Vandal begging them to turn back. The turning point came on the seventh day when, in the morning mist, they spotted what appeared to be an entrance carved into stone, partially hidden by roots and moss. This entrance did not appear in any archaeological record, and its architecture matched no known Andean culture. At the top, carved with chilling precision, was the same inverted spiral symbol they had seen days earlier. Something in the environment changed at that moment. The jungle fell into complete silence. No birds, no insects, just the sound of their own breathing and the distant echo of something dragging slowly. No one said it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. Eric Vandal had found this place before them, and something, perhaps something not meant to be seen, had kept him there. Entering the structure was a decision that divided the group. Some wanted to wait, study, and document it, while others felt an uncontrollable urgency, as if something or someone was pushing them inside. In the end, for members crossed the threshold, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a tension so thick it made the air feel heavy in their lungs. Inside, the darkness was absolute. The smooth, cold stone walls were covered in spiral-like symbols, smaller and laid out in repetitive patterns. There were no cobwebs, no insects, no signs of life, just silence and something else, a faint vibration, as if the entire place was breathing. After 5 minutes of exploration, One of them stumbled over an object on the floor. When they shone a light on it, their eyes widened. It was a metal canteen with an engraved tag. Despite the corrosion, it was still clearly legible. E.V. Vandal 1989. The object appeared to have been deliberately placed there, beneath a thin layer of soil and dust. Further ahead, they discovered what looked like an altar, with items carefully arranged on top. There were several objects: a damp notebook, a broken Polaroid camera, and a small stone figure with a featureless face. Some ink in the notebook was still legible, and on the last page, written hastily and erratically, were the words, "If you find this, do not wake it." The atmosphere became suffocating. A buzzing sound began to echo through the corridors, subtle at first, then sharper like a distant wail. The flashlight beams began to flicker, and the temperature dropped abruptly. That's when the youngest of the explorers turned toward the far end of the hallway and murmured, "Did you see that?" No one answered, but everyone felt it. A presence, a shift in air pressure, as if something had awakened upon their arrival. They fled the structure almost running, carrying only the notebook and the canteen. The shaman was waiting outside, motionless, eyes closed, lips murmuring prayers. Upon seeing the objects, he shook his head and said just one sentence. "You didn't find him. He called you." That night, the group camped in silence. No one ate, no one spoke. In their dreams, they all saw Eric again, but not as he once was. He was different, thinner, paler, smiling in a way they couldn't explain. The next morning, the shaman had vanished. When the group emerged from the jungle, exhausted and marked by something they couldn't voice, they weren't met with silence. The story had already spread. A drone sent days earlier by a European TV network had broadcast footage of the hidden temple, the spiral symbol, the recovered coordinates, and, most strikingly, one of the photos taken inside showed a human silhouette standing in the shadows at the end of the corridor, watching them. The press was quick to name the structure Eric's Sanctuary. The notebook was scanned, analyzed, and went viral. Experts in paleography, anthropology, and psychology dissected its phrases like sacred scriptures. Some claimed Eric had been the victim of an ancient cult. Others believed he discovered a hidden community practicing isolation rituals. But the most disturbing theory came from a German linguist. He argued that the symbols on the walls didn't belong to any known language, at least not a human one. He claimed their structure resembled binary coding, suggesting a non-terrestrial communication system. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, Eric's now elderly parents watched everything unfold with a mix of pain and hope. Eric's mother, in particular, felt a chill run down her spine when she saw the silhouette in the photo and heard the theories. She knew that, whatever had happened to her son, the truth was something they might never fully understand. Eric's belongings were returned in a private ceremony. His mother, holding the canteen through tears, whispered, "He's still here." She wasn't referring to a physical place, but rather something everyone involved felt yet couldn't name. 1 week after the expedition's return, some members began experiencing identical dreams in which they wandered alone through the jungle, and at some point, a voice whispered their names. The cameraman disappeared from his home, and later, his phone was found playing a distorted audio loop from the tape found on the altar. The Peruvian government declared the area restricted for cultural preservation. Despite this, clandestine recordings and local testimonies surfaced online. Floating lights between the trees, nighttime chants not made by human voices, and shadows that moved silently, like fog with a will of its own. Then, one final piece of the puzzle emerged. A new letter, dated 1994, and signed simply E, arrived at the Dutch embassy in Lima. The envelope was damaged, as if buried for years. The letter read, "Don't try to bring me back. I no longer belong to your time, but I am still watching." With the global release of the letter signed by E, a new chapter began. What was once an unsolved disappearance became a global phenomenon. Social media exploded with groups debating the message's hidden meaning. On conspiracy forums, a chilling theory gained traction. Eric hadn't just survived the jungle. He had accessed an ancient knowledge reserved for the chosen. His name began to appear on murals and songs and as tattoos, a symbol of transcendence and hidden truth. In France, Germany, and the United States, communities emerged calling themselves the Watchers of Vilcabamba, people who claim to receive similar dreams, hear voices speaking in unknown languages, and feel a presence in the jungle calling them by name. A Japanese author published a book titled Eric, the Threshold Guardian. It sold millions and was translated into over 20 languages. In it, the author suggested that the young Dutchman had been recruited by a dormant planetary consciousness, one that awakens periodically to correct humanity's mistakes. Meanwhile, Eric's mother, now a public figure, appeared in interviews without seeking the spotlight. "I don't want fame," she said, eyes fixed on nothing. "I just don't want them to forget him." In one interview, she showed a small stone she had received in the mail, no return address, months after returning from Peru. The stone was identical to those found on the altar with a hand-carved spiral. She claimed that, when she touched it, she felt her son nearby. Most unsettling of all, the stone seemed to emit a faint hum as night fell. The governments involved, including Peru and the Netherlands, were pressured to reopen the investigations. New satellite flights were organized to analyze the Vilcabamba area. During one of these flyovers, something unexpected happened. A humanoid figure was detected walking alone through a remote part of the jungle, exactly where Eric's notebook had been found. The image, though blurry, showed a silhouette wearing a sort of white robe. When zoomed in, it seemed as if the figure turned toward the camera and smiled. Despite attempts to suppress the image, it leaked, and the media nicknamed it the Monk of Vilcabamba. For some, it was Eric. For others, an imposter. But most agreed on one thing. Whatever happened in 1989 hadn't ended. It was just beginning. As satellites continued to send inexplicable images, and official investigations appeared bogged down by bureaucracy, something even more unsettling began to take shape. Local guides, many of them direct descendants of Quechua communities, started refusing to enter certain parts of the jungle. The jungle breathes there, they said, with a mix of respect and fear. Their accounts matched. Animals fled for no apparent reason. Trees bled a thick liquid when cut. Compasses spun wildly, and whispers were heard from nowhere. One of these guides, named Juan Isla, agreed to speak with foreign journalists investigating Eric's case. During their trek, Juan suddenly stopped upon finding an inscription carved into a stone hidden beneath a layer of dry leaves. The stone, the size of a notebook, had the same spiral as the altar discovered years before, surrounded by symbols no one could translate. That night, at the camp, all the lanterns failed simultaneously. The batteries drained within minutes, and a thick fog enveloped the tents despite the clear sky. The journalist managed to record part of the event on an old cassette Walkman. Although the audio was damaged by moisture, one part was clearly audible, a female voice whispering in French, repeating the phrase, "Je suis encore, I'm still here." When the recording was shown to sound experts, one of them, a former intelligence analyst, turned pale upon recognizing a wave pattern identical to those used in secret military transmissions from the 1980s. From that moment on, many began associating Eric's case with hidden experiments, interdimensional portals, or even contact with something modern civilization was only beginning to understand. The scientific community became divided. While some dismiss it all as a series of coincidences exaggerated by popular imagination, others, including anthropologists and astrobiologists, began reviewing ancient Inca texts and colonial records for clues. The journalist, deeply affected by the experience, abandoned the project, sold everything, and disappeared from public life. Rumors say he lives in a monastery in the Swiss Alps, without internet or phone, and that he has never slept well since. Several ancient documents mention the chosen ones who crossed the jungle without dying, people who entered and never returned, but whose presence continued to manifest in impossible ways. One such text spoke of a place where time folded and the soul was tested. Increasingly, people began to believe Eric Vandal had not simply gotten lost, but had been summoned. In 2004, 15 years after Eric Vandal's disappearance, a group of researchers led by Peruvian archaeologist Dr. Nicholas Alzamora returned to the restricted jungle zone where satellite anomalies had been detected. The mission was funded by a private Swiss foundation, whose representatives refused interviews, only mentioning that they were following forgotten coordinates. What they found defied all known logic. 70 kilometers from Eric's last recorded signal, in an area where even drones fail to fly without malfunctioning, they discovered a cave hidden behind a rockfall. Inside, protected by layers of moisture, moss, and darkness, was a kind of altar carved directly into the rock. The most striking object was a travel notebook resting on a central rock, still legible despite being soaked. On the first handwritten page was a phrase in Dutch. "If you find this, it means I managed to see you." The notebook belonged without a doubt to Eric Vandal. The handwriting and dates matched, but there was something impossible. The last entries were dated 1994, 5 years after his disappearance. In these pages, Eric described having discovered an invisible path, a route not seen with the eyes but felt with the breath. He wrote that he no longer felt hunger, that time did not pass the same way, and that he had begun dreaming of his own childhood despite never having slept. On another page, he described humanoid figures made of light, songs without language, and a living door that opened when someone accepted leaving behind everything they had been. The last entry, almost illegible, said, "I am not lost. I am closer than ever." What left everyone baffled was that, despite clearly age, the notebook was free of mold or insects, as if it had been placed there only days before. The notebook was sent to laboratories in Europe for analysis. Carbon-14 testing confirmed the pages were from 1988, but the ink did not match any known commercial brand. A German chemist stated the composition was anomalous, not manufactured by humans at that time. The news was kept secret from the public, and the Peruvian government declared the zone a critical archaeological reserve, closing all access. Only a photo of the notebook held against the light, with the inscription visible, briefly circulated on conspiracy theory forums. Before disappearing completely from the internet, the Swiss Foundation never operated in Latin America again. For those who had followed the case from the start, that photo was proof enough that Eric had been there and, perhaps, still was today. Eric Vandal's disappearance remains one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in the recent history of tourism in Peru. There is no body, no witnesses, no concrete evidence of what really happened. Only his notebook remains, fragments of his obsession, and a path closed by official silence. Though time has passed, his family never returned to South America. On every anniversary of the event, his older sister, Ingrid, posts the same phrase on a Dutch forum, "Te sigo esperando," where the world ends. In 2019, something else happened. An amateur hiker camping near the forbidden area captured a strange image with his drone. In a foggy clearing, a tall figure wearing a stained white t-shirt appeared, raised its face, and waved as if greeting. The file was posted online and deleted in less than 24 hours. The hiker's account was closed, and he hasn't posted anything since. However, someone managed to download the image before it disappeared. When zooming in on the pixelated face, some say they see the same eyes that appear in Eric's passport photo, the same shy smile. Others claim it was a hoax, a prank. But those who studied the case for years agree on one thing. On the figure's wrist, it's possible to see something shining, a handmade bracelet, blue and red, the same one Eric's mother had given him before his trip to Peru. Sometimes, mysteries don't need to be solved to stay alive. Some, like this one, seem made to remind us that not everything in the world has an explanation, and that there are paths that open only to those willing to lose themselves in them. As long as someone still remembers his name, Eric Vandal will keep walking through those mysterious mountains.